GamingBolt presents 15 saddest boss fights you didn't really want to fight. The boss battle is supposed to be the triumphant victory of good over evil and a summation of the skills you learn through reaching that big bad, isn't it? Well, once upon a time, games needed to be that black and white because there wasn't much space for a lengthy script in the tiny space on an NES cartridge. Technology is a wonderful thing, however, and games can get complicated in some brilliant narrative ways, where who's on the right side of history isn't always so black and white. Here's 15 of our favorites, but make sure you share your memorably tragic villains in the comments below. Xander, Fire Emblem Fates, Birthright. Within Fire Emblem Fates, the player character Corrin is forced to choose sides against either the kingdom that raised them but stole them away as a child, or against his birthright kingdom of Hoshido. Late into the game, the player goes up against the eldest brother of the kingdom they stood against. While the tragic circumstances and the fact that neither brother manages to live through the battle is hard to watch on either side, Xander, scion of Nor, that you take on in the Birthright path, wins out on how heavy it is. The encounter with Xander begins with him accidentally cutting down his own little sister, who stepped in between them to stop them from fighting. Instead of heeding her final wish to lay down his sword, Xander is forced to stand with Nor and raises it against the sibling he believes betrayed him. Xion, Kingdom Hearts 365 over 2 days. It's hard to give a rundown of the tangled and storied web that is Kingdom Hearts lore, but in Kingdom Hearts 365 over 2 days, Roxas, Axel, and Xion work for Organization 13 and Bond, trying to find their place in the world. The young woman is a nobody created from the memories of Sora and altered at the end by Organization 13 to absorb Roxas. The long road to the end of the game and all of the time spent bonding with Xion is what makes her hard to fight and harder to see disappear forever afterwards. Orphan of Kos, Bloodborne. There's a lot of things that go bump in the night in Bloodborne, but the final boss of the DLC, Orphan of Kos, is particularly tragic. The corpse of the dead child of Cosm, Orphan of Kos is the final boss of the DLC, and like most other things in the game, is shrouded in mystery, though you can observe some details, such as the suggestion that the death of Garamond's wife and child by his hand is what gave birth to the hunter's nightmare. Grima, Fire Emblem Awakening. Fire Emblem Awakening, easily the favorite of the 3DS trilogy, throws in a fairly stunning twist right towards the end of the game. Robin, your player-created avatar that you've grown with the rest of your army through the entire game, is revealed to be the incarnation of Fell Dragon Grima, a dark dragon that threatens the world. When a timeline-split version of Grima rises to power, the player has two kinds of awful choices to make. Either allow Chrom to land the killing blow and let him rise in a century's time once again, or let Robin use his connection to Grima to kill the Fell Dragon for good, but themselves disappear in the process. The 16 Colossi, Shadow of the Colossus Remastered. Shadow of the Colossus is an especially strong subversion of the usual power fantasy that comes with toppling an immense boss. There's an uncomfortable undercurrent that runs through the majority of the game, with Team Ico's masterpiece not even trying to pretend that you're the good guy. Wander and the player themselves push on through 16 beasts, many of whom were just minding their own business until you stick them with your sword. It's really the artistic point of the game that leaves the player asking, why am I doing this? The Boss, Metal Gear Solid 3. The Boss is what makes Metal Gear Solid 3 the tightest game in Hideo Kojima's works by a long shot. The motherly relationship that this tragic soldier had with Snake made putting her down, forcing the player themselves to pull the trigger, heart-wrenching enough. But the revelation following that shot rings right through the entire Metal Gear lore. It was her mission to be a double agent, turncoat to get the United States, the Philosopher's legacy, and in the end, be killed by her pupil. Her country turning her back on her, and her dying for her country anyways, would sow the seeds for the eventual rise of Big Boss. Sif, the Great Grey Wolf, Dark Souls. Nothing in the realm of From Software's Dark Souls is black and white. Sif, the Great Grey Wolf, is a boss from the first game, whose story is told entirely through the details for those who would look. Sif is found at the grave of Sir Artorias, and takes up the sword of her fallen master against you. Her attack is not out of bloodlust, rather she takes up the sword herself to prevent you from meeting Artorias' grim fate in memory of her master. The fact that she begins to limp as she nears death just gives that extra kick to the gut. Maiden ASTRAEA, Demon Souls. The pure nun, Maiden ASTRAEA, ventures into the fog of Boletaria with her trusted bodyguard, Garl Vinland, hoping to use her skills to help ease the plague-ridden kingdom's inhabitants. As a sixth saint of the church, she feels like it's her duty to do no harm. Not so for her bodyguard, who will have to be felled before speaking with ASTRAEA. Her pure intentions were warped by the fog, and her demon soul must be claimed to finish the game. Once you take down her trusted bodyguard, she will lament her fate and finish herself off. Nier. The merciless Shadow Lord that Nier spends the whole of the original game chasing is a merciless man, responsible for the shades that threaten the world and the man who kidnapped Nier's daughter. If he was doing it all for kicks, he'd be a pretty despicable guy, but the kind of twist that only Yoko Taro would be able to come up with casts him in a completely new light. The man seen in the prologue and the girl with him were the original Nier and his daughter, fleeing from a plague that would destroy humanity. Experiments separated humanity into their soul, the shades, and their physical, the gestalts, and the two were intended to reunite once the plague had passed. Shadow Lord himself is the other half of the player character, and is only trying to do the same as him or any parent would, anything it took for their daughter to live. The Masked Man, Mother 3. As emotionally charged as it can possibly get, The Masked Man of Mother 3 is the culmination of something players were teased with the entire game whenever something traumatic or uncomfortable happened around Lucas or his friends. When it comes to the climax of the game, and all that stands between you and the end of your journey is the Masked Man. His identity is revealed as the long-thought-to-be-dead twin brother Klaus. The player is then pulled between the goings-on of battle and flashback sequences of their life together, only for it all to end with Klaus, caught in the same reminiscing of old times, deliberately has his attack reflected back at him from Lucas, keeping the player from that glimpse of a happy ending. Nishiki, Yakuza Kiwami. Having grown up in the same orphanage as Kiryu Kazuma himself, the two boys were inseparable friends, even joining the Dojima clan of the Yakuza at the same time as the protagonist of the series. When late in the game Kiryu is going against the family, Nishiki goes against him. It's as uncomfortable as it should be, watching the struggle between loyalty to a friend or a group play out during the fight. Jin, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Jin. Oh, Jin. One of the primary antagonists of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is also quite possibly one of the best and most sympathetic villains in a Nintendo game. When Xenoblade Chronicles 2 starts out, it's easy to be apathetic towards him at best. He seems like a fairly generic bad guy, or actively hate him at worst, since, he does kill Rex in the very first chapter of the game. But as you play more of Xenoblade 2 and learn more about him and his mysterious past, the more you are forced to confront his dark reality, and why he is doing what he's doing. Ultimately, Xenoblade 2 is as much Jin's story as it is Rex and Pyra's, and it weighs on you heavily when you finally have to face him with that knowledge. Sam, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Metal Gear Rising isn't quite as high and intellectual as Metal Gear Solid 2 or 3, but Sam, the skilled swordsman who would stand against and taunt Raiden while he tried to take down the world-dominating plan of Desperado, was himself somewhat of a tragic figure. We learn through his DLC chapter that he has a fairly strong sense of justice that got crushed during his own crusade. Raiden is his reflection of a man who doesn't give up on his ideals and justice, and that fact makes his redemption by providing his sword to Raiden to take down Armstrong all the more effective. Beating Emil, Nier Automata. A key figure from the first game, the nihilistic tone of Nier Automata sees this young child having lived thousands of years into the future in a fairly battered mechanical form. He takes the player on because they took something from his room, but upon being beaten, Emil breaks down into tears, crushed by the realization that compassion is meaningless and only power matters. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.